to The Straight Stitch, a podcast about sewing and other fiber arts. This is episode 127, and my name is Janet Szabo. I'll be your guide as we explore all things sewing. It just so happens that I am recording this on National Sewing Machine Day, so I know that you'll be listening to this after today, but whatever day you happen to be hearing this, go ahead and give your sewing machine a little extra love. Maybe give it a spa day, some extra oil and a deep cleaning, because we couldn't do what we do without these amazing machines. I have an interview for you today, but I'm going to give you a little bit of an update first. Some things are happening, so if you want to skip to the interview, you won't hurt my feelings. But if you're in the Seattle area, you might want to listen. I am going to be teaching at Quilting Mayhem in Snohomish, Washington on September 3rd and 4th. About a month ago, I saw one of their posts on Facebook noting that they were looking for knitting teachers. Quilting Mayhem is a quilt store, obviously, and a Bernina dealer, but they also have a section for knitting for knitters, and they announced that they were looking for knitting teachers. So I sent off a package of my classes and my class policies, and they got in touch with me and asked if I would come and teach. And I thought they were going to choose mostly knitting classes, but we're doing half and half. So on Thursday, September 3rd, I am doing two classes, one called Fit Without Fear in the morning, and then another one in the afternoon called Pattern Hacking and Franken Patterning. If you are a sewist who struggles with either of those topics, I'd encourage you to sign up for the class. You can go to their website at www.quiltingmayhem.com. I will also put the links in the show notes. And then on Friday, September 4th, I'm teaching two knitting classes. So the morning class is Knitting Skill Builder, and the afternoon class is the Basics of Lace Knitting. I am really excited about this. I've been to Quilting Mayhem a couple of times. It's a wonderful store, and I'm looking forward to getting to meet more of the Seattle sewists and knitters. So we are almost to the middle of June. 2026 has been flying by, and I like to be busy, but I don't like the feeling that life is just speeding past me. So I am trying to be intentional about finding some moments of calm and quiet. The garden is in. We are supposed to get piglets sometime in the next couple of weeks. So I feel like it's a good time for me to slow down and take a little bit of a break after what was kind of a nutty month of May getting ready for the plant sale. I did get in a little bit of sewing this week. You might remember that a couple of months ago I made a pair of Burnside bibs. That's a Sew House 7 pattern. I made a sample pair for the shop, for the quilt store, and then I made a pair for one of the staff members at the store, a young woman named Sammy, and she asked me to make hers out of a Tula Pink wide back, which I did. And every time I see photos of her on Facebook or Instagram, it seems like she's wearing her bibs. She really likes them, and she looks adorable in them. One of the other staff members at the store, her name is Dawn, asked me if I could make her a pair, and we're using the same Tula Pink wide back fabric, but in a slightly different colorway. So Sammy's are the dark gray, and Dawn's are going to be the light gray, and I have those about halfway done. We've had a couple of afternoons this week where we've had thunderstorms and rain showers. So on one afternoon, I cut out all of the pattern pieces, and then yesterday, I began putting them together. And I've got about one more afternoon's worth of work, and I'll be able to hand them off to Dawn. Dawn told me when she gave me the fabric that Sammy has already asked Dawn if she could take Dawn's pair to Bernina University with her because she wants to wear both pairs. but they're going to have to work that out between them. The Burnside bibs aren't a style that I would wear necessarily, but I've enjoyed making them. All the Sew House 7 patterns are absolutely phenomenal, and I've really enjoyed all 3 pairs that I've made. The other sewing that I did this week was a pair of the Made by Ray Rose pants. Made by Ray is another great pattern company. I've made 3 of her patterns, the emerald dress, the geranium dress, that's a little girl's dress, and now the rose pants. And I am absolutely in love with this pattern. It goes together really well, and they're flattering. They're a wide leg high-rise pant, and I absolutely love that style. It looks good on me. I made these out of some navy blue linen rayon blend fabric from Joann's. If you remember the linen rayon blend that they used to carry, I bought 3 yards when they were going out of business last year, and that's what I used for the rose pants. I had previously made a quick muslin in the shorts length just because I wanted to check the fit and the height of the rise. And in the size that I made, I did not need to adjust the rise. They fit very well. I have some royal blue Tencel twill in my stash, and I'm thinking that that's going to be used for my next pair of rose pants because I've been saving it for a special pattern. Once I finish the Burnside bibs for Dawn, I'm going to start working on the Seamwork Lou raincoat, and I've decided I'm going to just make it and not worry about a muslin because it's a raincoat. It doesn't need to fit perfectly. And looking at the fit model information that they give on their website, which is phenomenal, they do one of the best jobs of giving fit model information of any of the indie pattern companies. Their fit model and I have very similar measurements, and I think I can make the size that their fit model is wearing and not have any issues. So let's get into today's interview. My guest is Heather Webster, a delightful lady. Heather has a website called pattern-walk.com where she sells vintage sewing patterns. So if you are looking for a particular pattern or just enjoy sewing from vintage patterns, her website is one to check out for sure. Interviewing Heather is another listener suggestion, and I am delighted when my listeners ask for particular guests to be on the show. Not everybody says yes, but a lot of people do, so keep those suggestions coming, and I will do what I can to get those guests on the podcast. Heather has a great story, and I will let you hear from her in her own words. Heather, welcome to the podcast.
So nice to be here.
One of my podcast listeners suggested you as a guest, and your website is, if I get this wrong, correct me, but I believe it's www.pattern-walk.com.
That's correct.
And you have a variety of vintage sewing patterns on your website. So we're going to talk about how you got started and where you're planning to go with that in the future. And this is just a conversation over a cup of tea.
That sounds wonderful.
So I usually start by asking people how they learned to sew and maybe how old you were and who taught you.
Well, I was raised in South Africa on a farm with no electricity, and I lived with my grandmother until I was about 9. And she had one of those old Singer pedal machines. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
And she had a chase where she kept all of her sewing equipment and fabric and patterns and things. And although I was not allowed to use the pedal sewing machine, I was allowed to go into the chase and look at all the patterns and the fabric and the buttons. And she taught me to sew by hand, but her machine was very precious and I was too small to reach the pedals. So that was where my interest in sewing began then. I suppose around what you would call middle school. We had home economics in my day, and we sewed aprons in one of those, or a couple of those home economics classes. But again, not powered machines. They were the hand Singer sewing machines that you would roll around. And that was my very early experience of sewing. But I always wanted a really nice machine and to sew properly. So when I was in my 20s, I bought myself a Bernina Record 930. And believe it or not, it is still my favorite machine. I've held it around for 45 years or so, and it's my best machine in the world. It does my primary sewing. I've got two others. I've got a Brother 1034D and a 2340D CD for other things, but my primary machine is still my faithful old Bernina. And so when I bought her, I went to the Bernina um, retailer for classes on how to use her. And I went to a private woman for sewing classes to learn how to sew myself dresses and my children clothes and things like that. And that's where it began. But then my career took off, and I had many, 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 many years of no time with family and working and things, and I didn't sew until I got to where I was thinking of retiring. And I hauled my old machine out and started sewing again. So that's my sewing story. Today I sew most of my own clothes and enjoy it.
May I ask how you got from South Africa to the United States?
At the time, my children were 16 and 13, and believe it or not, I won a green card in the lottery. I won the jackpot, and I decided that this was a definite sign that I should come to America with my children, so I came over with them. It was a big move. I moved into the same house I'm living in now, and I've told everyone I'm not leaving. I have a coffin in my ceiling. You'll take me out in my box.
So, when you retired and you began sewing again, what drew you to the vintage patterns?
I dropped into an estate sale in the neighborhood next to mine with no intention of buying anything, but just out of curiosity. And in the spare bedroom, I came across a shoebox full of vintage sewing patterns, the like 1920s, the male type shipping sewing patterns. And I guess I just like old things, but I love the drawings and I love the old patterns. And so I bought this box of real vintage patterns for I think about $5. And I brought them home and I had no idea why I wanted them. I just liked them. But an interesting thing happened around the same time. I started seeing sewing patterns, print sewing patterns everywhere. And so I got a little addicted and I started buying boxes of sewing patterns. And I discovered that there was a market for them on Etsy at that time. So I thought, oh, well, I can do this. So I started selling on Etsy, um, not in a big way, just, what I was picking up every now and again that, I thought someone might like. But eventually it got such that the Etsy fees were too unsustainable. It was just kind of crazy. So I thought to myself, well, I can build myself my own website. So that's exactly what I did. I built a website and then I started getting more serious about it. And I started actually looking for patterns. And I'd go to estate sales, Goodwills, all over the show to rescue patterns. In the fullness of time, people got to know what I was doing, and I found, and I still find, many people who are downsizing, they can't bring themselves to throw out their patterns. Um, and the principal thing I hear from them is that they would like them to be useful to somebody. And so I come home days and there are boxes of patterns on my front doorstep that people are just donating just so that they have a second life. So today I have about 18,000 paper patterns on my website. When Joann's closed, I was fortunate enough to be able to buy a lot of their cabinets. So I have two bedrooms full of sewing patterns and cabinets and filing boxes and things. And it's turned into a wonderful retirement hobby for me. It's something to do, people who it's a nice exchange with people who are sewing things and they find a pattern and they're so excited about it. And, it's just a nice hobby.
How long have you been doing this now?
Oh, about 10 years.
Have
That's how
you?
we build up to 18,000 patterns. You know?
I don't feel so
And
bad
I
about
ship
my pattern stash now.
but I ship all over the world. All over the world. I ship, I think the farthest I've shipped was Finland. You know, it's amazing.
Are you finding now that just thinking about the thrift store in my own town, they used to carry patterns and you could go in and get a pattern for 10 cents. And somebody new took over a couple years ago and they said, we're not taking patterns anymore. We're not carrying patterns. And I think they probably all ended up in a dumpster somewhere. So there's
That is
only,
what is happening.
yeah, there's only one other store that has patterns available. Is it getting harder to find them, or maybe not if people are sending them to you and they're ending up on your doorstep?
They are certainly scarce. There was a time where I could go to Goodwill and I would find bins of sewing patterns. They're not accepting them anymore and even if they're not cut, they're not accepting them really. So, yep, they are becoming less available in the places where they used to be 5 years ago. Now they're not there anymore. And the main place that I'm now getting them is people who, either customers or people who know of my website or know of me, who are downsizing. And they'll just say, they'll either appear here or they'll say, if you can come and fetch them, you can have them. You know, that's where I find in the last 5 years, most of my patterns come from. I had one lady who was so attached to her patterns and she had beautiful patterns and lots of them. And I forget where she was. She was up north somewhere, maybe Illinois, somewhere up there. But she would mail me boxes of beautiful patterns and she just couldn't bring herself to throw them out or to have them thrown out. And so, at her own expense, she would mail them to me. So that kind of thing happens.
When you get a box of patterns like that, or when you pick patterns up at a thrift store, what's your process for getting them into saleable condition and putting them on your website and then filing them? I assume you have a system.
Oh boy, do I have a system. You would think that this would be the easiest thing in the world. But first of all, I've obviously got to go through all the patterns, remove many, not many, but some of them will not be saleable. For example, the instructions are missing, or, they clearly have not been looked after and the pieces are not there. Unfortunately, those do have to get thrown out. So that's the first thing that happens. And then I sort them by brand. And then obviously I have to check that I do not have an existing listing or an incoming pattern. Once I've done that, I would now be sitting with a box of patterns that I do not have on my website. So then I have to price them, which I do by comp. So I go and I have a look, see what patterns are going for, and I create a spreadsheet, which is a huge spreadsheet, as you can imagine, because I'm using WooCommerce and an SEO function on it. So that gets uploaded to my website, and then I have to scan both front and back of the envelope and associate that with the new listing and publish it. That's not the end of the story because then they have to be filed. And my filing system is pretty much logical. It's brand and by number. So that's the way I do it. So then they're all filed away. When someone purchases a pattern, that's the next piece in the process. I obviously have to pull the pattern, and hopefully my filing has been good. and I can find it instantly. And then it's the shipping and the dropping off. I use USPS. Um, Even for international, I use USPS. So it is a process and it is time consuming and it does take a lot of space. As I said, I've got two bedrooms, large bedrooms, and one storage sort of attic area, completely full of patterns. So it has become a monster.
Do you still sew?
I do, I do. In fact, I sewed the dress I'm wearing today.
And do
Um,
you sew from any of the vintage patterns or
I do. I do. I sew from, I use the patterns that I've got. I'd be crazy not to.
right?
And I know that, there's the PDF pattern thing that's come on the market, but many people still want the traditional paper pattern and don't want to have to deal with the whole PDF saga. So yes, I sew most of my own clothing. I mostly wear dresses, so that's kind of easy. Um, I took to sewing totes last year in winter. I was given a load of upholstery fabric, and I wondered what on earth I was going to do with it. So I sewed a bunch of really nice totes that were gifted to friends and things for Christmas. And so I primarily sew in winter because in summer I garden. I have a flower garden and I sell flowers at my local farmers market. So I'm very busy spring through to fall with that. And then in winter I sew.
Yes, winter is my primary sewing time too. I get that completely. Have you noticed are there a lot of differences between maybe vintage patterns and the more modern patterns? Has sizing changed? Have the instructions changed?
Yeah, your more modern patterns come in multi-sizes, whereas the older patterns, sort of 1970s-ish, were all a single size. So th there's that big difference. Then the older than that, if we're going back a ways to where Advance was, you know, a pattern, they didn't have any lines on them at all, So it must have been incredibly difficult to use those patterns. But there are people, because the styles are so unique, and I would imagine very experienced seamstresses, but there are people who do buy the very old Advanced with no lining on them at all. But to answer
Wow.
your question, the big change has been the multi-size
Okay.
print pattern versus the single size.
I've used probably the oldest pattern I think I've used was maybe from the 80s. It just seems to me that the instructions might have been a little better written back then.
That is a truth. And the other advantage we have now is we have YouTube. If there's something that is not clear,
True.
we have YouTube to look at. I can't imagine, uh, how difficult it must have been if it wasn't clear on those instructions from way back when, what to do. I mean, you had no recourse at all, but at least now there's help out there. The other thing that is very useful are the kind of upsizing or downsizing instructions that are available online for every brand. Which, if you do land up with a vintage pattern, say a 70s pattern that is a size, let's just say size 6, but you want it to be in a size 8 or 10, there are good instructions for every brand on how to upsize that pattern, which I found really helpful sometimes
Oh, I
because
didn't
my
know that.
sizing has, yeah, yeah, you should look it up because I don't know, like most of us, I went from being a size 4 or 6 sometimes to now I'm a huge size 14.
Right? Yeah.
So that is an important thing.
You have a blog on your website, and I got went down a rabbit trail one morning and read a bunch of your blog posts. They're extremely well written and they're fascinating.
They
So,
are? thank you.
Yeah. It seems like you spend a fair bit of time maybe researching and trying to put them in context, I guess, is how I would say it.
I don't blog all of the time. Maybe I'll put out a blog post once a month or once every 6 weeks. And I try to come up with a interesting, creative way of looking at sewing something. It could be a seasonal something of like at the beginning of spring, I think I did something on formal wear. So I do try and come up with an interesting something to discuss. But I'm not hugely creative that way, so it's hard work. It's not an easy thing to do
Well,
for
I
me.
enjoyed them very much.
Thank you. Can I ask you some questions?
Sure.
When did you start this?
The
And
podcast?
what, yeah, the podcast, and what made you start your podcast?
Oh, I started this podcast, I think about 3 years ago. It'll be 3 years in September. And
Hmm.
I tell people it was a very difficult day, the day that I decided to do a podcast. My husband and I raised pigs during the summer,
Oh, okay.
and at the end of the summer we have to take them to the processor. And that particular year we did 8 pigs, which is a lot for us. And we had to take them to a processor that was 80 miles away, and it was a very hot day in August. And pigs do not sweat. That's why pigs like wallows, because that's how they cool off. And
Hmm.
we had to load these pigs very early in the morning and get them to the processor. And we got down to the processor only to discover that they had decided not to be there that day, and we didn't know that. So we waited for them a little bit and then we turned around and brought the pigs back to our house. But in the process, one of them died. So we got everybody unloaded. My husband took care of burying the dead pig, and I headed into town. And I happened to be listening to a podcast done by a friend of mine about homesteading. And she was talking about how when you homestead, and this can apply to a lot of things, a lot of times you only show the good things that happen and you don't necessarily show the bad things that happen or talk about the bad things
Hmm.
that happen. And I thought, I really want to do a podcast and I really want to talk about sewing. And I want to talk about the good parts of sewing. And I also talk about the bad parts of sewing. Um, so that was kind of how that came about. It was just kind of a spur of the moment thing. And I started doing it. And it's been a lot of fun. I've met some really cool people. So, not the answer you were expecting.
No, but it's a little bit like my answer was about how did I start with patterns? It was an accident. It wasn't something I consciously set out to do
Right?
until I was doing it. And like you, it's turned out to be a lot of fun.
Yes. How do you think that you will continue to do this for a while yet?
I intend to do it as long as I'm physically able. Um, the biggest challenge for me is changing technology. Um, you know, uh, Upkeeping a website and keeping it current and with all the technological changes that go on, that is more challenging than anything for me. But as long as I'm able to do it, I will. And then hopefully one day I'll be able to pass it on to somebody else, because it is a library. It's a resource library. So even if I just, give it to my local guild or something, I hope it has a life for a long time. That's what I'm building for, is a library that can outlive me, I hope.
I'm tempted to go to the thrift store and buy all of their patterns and send them to you just because I want to rescue them.
Well, that's exactly what I felt. I just thought, I can't let these things just be thrown out. This is not right. And then, as I said, it grew into a monster, but a monster I love and has brought me much joy.
I sometimes wonder, everything is digital now. Photos are digital. We've lost a little bit of the physical. And
Hmm.
I wonder sometimes, 50 years from now or 100 years from now, are people going to be looking for these kinds of things? Are they going to be looking for the paper patterns from the 20th century and they just won't exist anymore?
Well, I think they will be. And judging by, the traffic on my website, I think it's a long game. I think it's almost, there are a lot of youngsters learning to sew now. They're becoming quite, I'm not saying all, but there are a lot. It there was a time where only kind of my age group sewed, but there are younger people getting to sew and buy patterns and get more analog. So, I'm believing that there will always be a demand for the actual physical pattern, not just a digital.
I like that expression, the long game.
It is. That's what it is. I mean, if you think about it, 18,000 patterns rescued over 10 years. That's a long game. And hopefully, in 30 years or 40 years, they will be much appreciated still.
I suspect your grandmother would approve.
Think so. I think she would be very proud of me.
And whatever happened to her sewing machine? Were you ever able to sew on it?
No, she never ever let me sew on it. It was her pride and joy. It was, like me with my Benina, I have friends who will pop in here and say, "Oh, can we just use your machine just to do this little repair?" And I say, "There's some rules I have, and one is nobody but me sews on my machine. I'll gladly do that for you, but you are not allowed to sew on it." And so I've held that rule forever. And she was the same. We just were not allowed to touch it. It was her baby.
I have a friend that has a Bernina 930 record that she bought in when she was in college in the 70s, and she
Uh-huh.
still
Yep.
uses it and she
Yep.
adores it. It is her favorite
Yep.
machine ever. I totally get
It
it.
that's exactly how I feel. It's a workhorse. It does anything and everything I ask it to do. Um, it's it was the last machine before everything became computerized, made by Benina.
Right.
I, I'm quite sure there are many advantages to the computerized machines. I'm sure they're lovely. I'm not being critical, but I like the fact that mine is not computerized, that, I have to set it myself. I know the machine and it will just do anything I ask of it. So I'm not parting with it ever. But I must say, I do appreciate the overlocker and the top stitcher that I have. Those are nice to have.
I do all my quilt piecing on oh, it's probably close to 80 years old now, an old Necky straight stitch sewing machine.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
and
It,
it's one of my babies. I really like it.
I'm sure it must do a good job for you to be so fond of it.
Well, is there anything I haven't asked you that you want to talk
Mm,
about?
no, I think we've covered all the bases, I think.
And
I
I
was
will put your website in the show notes and we'll just mention it again. It's www.pattern-walk.com.
Thank you. And it's been wonderful
I've enjoyed this
chatting
very
to you.
much.
Good.
Do check out Heather's website. It's a great resource if you are looking for a particular vintage pattern or want to try one. Check out her blog posts. And for you history buffs out there, I will mention a book that I have in my library. It is called A History of the Paper Pattern Industry, The Home Dressmaking Fashion Revolution by Joyce Bannabel Emery. So if you want to delve even deeper and go back and read some of the history, it's a fascinating book. Again, I really appreciate the feedback and the guest suggestions, so keep them coming. I will do what I can to get suggested guests on the show. You can email me at janet@janetzabo.com. You can leave a comment on the show notes page, or you can use the fan mail feature. My website is www.janetzabo.com, and that has links to the Big Sky Knitting Designs website and to my blog. I'm hoping to get more sewing pictures up this week, but right now it's a little bit of homesteading stuff on the blog, so if you're interested in that, go take a look. And I am going to head up to my sewing room and try and finish a pair of Burnside bibs. So until the next episode, I hope you have a great week and you get to go sew something.